It is hard to miss the focus of the readings today. The very first reading begins by saying, conduct yourself, live with the spirit of humility. Or in the middle of the gospel just proclaimed by Deacon John, it says there very clearly, the one who humbles themselves will be exalted. The call is to live with a humility, a spirit about us of reality. Pride will always divide us. Humility will unite us. Pride will show us the differences, where humility will remind us of the similarities between us. It reminded me of a story about a pastor in a small Appalachian community. No more than 60 or 80 people gathered at any one of their weekend liturgies. So as he was preaching, he remembered that in this past week, his people had come to him, and they had not really grasped the message. He thought it was time for one of his, fire and brimstone homilies. So he began. Throughout the more than half hour, he was revving up to a great crescendo. And he got to the point where he says, finally looking out to all of them, no member here will get out alive. You're all going to die. You're all going to meet the Lord. So no member here, no one who is a member of this parish will not die. All of you will die. Well, he thought that was a pretty sobering thought, so he paused, looking out to all of them to see their reaction. And it was appropriate. They were duly, but their heads bowed down and a little more somber and solemn over the prospect that all would die. Except for one woman in the second row. She was smiling and beaming. He couldn't get over it. So he said it again. No member of this parish will live forever. You're all going to die, all of you. And so finally he had to single her out. He said, what are you smiling about? This is serious. She said, well, you said no member here is going to live. All are going to die. She said, I'm just a visitor. I'm not a member. Pride will always separate us. Humility will always unite us. Pride makes us think we're above another. Humility reminds us we are walking together with each other. Humility is very important, why the Lord puts it in the gospel, because he reminds us very simply but very importantly that if you and I acknowledge with humility our limitations, our challenges, then we have a freer life. It is a life that is not built on trying to hide any imperfections or to avoid any flaws or challenges or have to in some way find ourselves covering over things. We'll spend a lifetime, if we don't acknowledge it, thinking we are unacceptable, trying to make up for something that we don't have to. Acknowledging my imperfections, my challenges. I can say I'm not as forgiving as others. I can say that I often hold grudges. I quickly judge others. I hold on to old prejudices. I nurture old wounds and hurts. And besides that, I have many other challenges in my life. If I acknowledge them, then I'm already acknowledging that I need God's love and help. I need God's compassion and care to carry those burdens, to work through those limitations, to confront those challenges. But not only does humility do that and enable me to be freer in who I am, it reminds me that although I have those limitations, even though I face many personal challenges, I still do not deny the truth that God sees in me someone who is good. God recognizes in me holiness. God wants from me only faithfulness. That's an important piece because acknowledging my limitations is not to demean my own dignity and goodness given to me by God. Acknowledging limitations is only to embrace God's power, to seek God's help, to await God's compassion. That's an important part of humility. It's an honest assessment of who I am, but a true evaluation of what God is as well. So humility first helps me become who I am and see who I am in the eyes of God. Beyond that, though, humility helps me recognize the same in you, helps us grow together in a better sense. You and I have all had that experience, I think, when the death of someone we love, someone very close to us, family member or friend. And in that, we are humbled every time we confront death. I am humbled because I cannot control all the events of life. And so when someone comes to me to comfort me, console me, just to be with me in kindness, I am humbled by that. But I am also grateful for that. I am enriched because I am humble enough to accept their compassion, accept their consolation. It happens as well for the many who are in 12-step programs. They, better than others, recognize that they are powerless over the limitations, over the addictions, over the challenges in their life. And so, in that, they are able to embrace the power of God. Not only that, but they unite themselves with a community who supports them. They know without God and this community, they are adrift. They are not rooted, not well-grounded. So in their humility, recognizing their need for God and others, they are bonded with others, and they help one another. They know that is their lifeline. That is their hope. The same thing happens with those who face serious illness. They know they are united with others with a similar diagnosis. And as they struggle with that, as they are humbled by it, and they find themselves growing more dependent on others, they recognize the need to hold together with each other. And I find in those people with those similarities a union. They gather together, they help one another, they reach out to each other. And whether it is in groups or one by one, they try to assist one another. Their humility under that diagnosis has enabled them to reach out and unite with others and strengthen them and give them encouragement and hope as no one else can do. That humility will unite us, will enrich our lives, will join us together. The Jewish theologian Martin Buber had a great line. He was asked one time, "Where is God?" Now, the usual facile answer is simply to say, "God's everywhere." But Martin was more thoughtful. He was more focused. He said, God is between people. God, in other words, is in our relationships with one another. God is there between us. Wasn't it Christ who said, first love your God and then love your neighbor as yourself? In our love for each other, in our relationships with one another, we discover God, as well as deepening our relationships with each other. There in that relationship, which is forged by our humility, we discover the goodness of God. Humility is essential if we're to connect with God and relationship with each other. So maybe this gospel might call me to pull back a little bit and see where my pride has pulled me apart, but my humility can draw me together with others. And how essential it is to recognize in humility my limitation, but still the goodness and holiness God has given me. And doing that, it enables me to reach out in compassionate ways to others with similar difficulties, challenges, and limitations. This week, draw away from the pride, draw closer to the humility, and recognize the unity you'll discover there with God and one another.